Hi, next up, the state of our world with Michael Milken, the founder of the Milken Institute, and David A. Steinberg, co-founder, chairman, and CEO of Zeta Global.
I haven't seen you speak at a Michael, we are honored to have you here. I haven't seen you speak at a non-Milken event in quite some time, so I greatly appreciate it. The term legend gets thrown around a lot. Very rarely is it as accurate a description as it is of you. As evidenced by the fact when I went to pull your bio, it was 7 full pages, single-spaced in font so small I could barely read it. Now, obviously, you changed capital markets. You created millions of jobs. The Milken Family Foundation has helped to revolutionize education, healthcare, capital markets across the world. And I think most of our people know that. What they might not know is that in high school, you played basketball, tennis, and ran track, which is very impressive, but not as impressive as you being voted the friendliest kid at your high school. I know you're friendly, but that's a pretty high bar.
It is.
Very, very high bar. Well, in all seriousness, I'm super excited to have you here today to talk to Zeta Live and be a part of this event.
Well, 60 years of work finally got me this opportunity at Zeta. So what can we say?
You worked hard to get to this Zeta Live level, right? Well, let's jump in. The state of the world is, you might say, in flux right now, right? We have the highest inflation in 40 years. We are dealing with the first material ground war in Europe since World War II. Monetary policy is tightening at as rapid a pace as I've seen, and recession is either here from a technical definition or looming. What do you see is going on right now?
It was 53 years ago I gave this first speech on Wall Street that the best investor was the social scientists. And COVID created an environment where, in order to protect the world's economy, the governments put out an enormous amount of money, trillions of dollars, and have continued to put that out and created artificially low interest rates during that period of time. And therefore, the side effect is inflation. And inflation's with us, and all financial markets are underpinned by debt markets. And so the increasing rate of return you can get in interest on your money has put pressure on equity markets, but all forms of markets. And in just 9 months, we've had a doubling of mortgage rates.
Hit an all-time high just a week or two ago.
Not an all-time high. All-time high since
14
08
years.
or something.
You're right. 14 years. I apologize. Yes.
Mortgage rates were 18% in 1981.
Yes. You're right. I'm wrong.
My only point being here that this increase in interest rates is going through the economy. And buying a house, buying a car, buying a refrigerator, for most people, is really not the price. It's the monthly payment.
I always say that. Yeah.
And so the facts are the monthly payment has doubled.
Right.
Driving your car has doubled. And so the cost today for half the people in America, they cannot afford to save with what's happened with costs. And that is driving inflation. Many other factors are driving, and we're going to see now for the next year or two that wage inflation is driven due to numerous job openings.
Of course.
Yeah. And the fact you've had a tremendous change in demographics in the world.
How has the marketing of vaccinations, how do we do a better job helping the people who are not into vaccinations, to put it politely? Has there ever been another time where we've had to help people to understand that vaccinations are important, and how do they deal with it then?
The answer to that question is yes. There was a time in my lifetime, and that was polio. So polio was declared an epidemic in 1952. And we had maybe 50, 60,000 people in the United States diagnosed. but million around the world. And we had, maybe up to 3,000 to 5,000 that died. My father had polio. And in 1955, you had this vaccine, Salk vaccine, that was discovered, and the next year the Sabin vaccine. So science had been working on this, but in a very short period of time. Now the question is, you had something that works, would people take it?
Right.
1 year after this vaccine was approved, less than 1% of all teenagers in America have been vaccinated. Less than 1%. There was enormous resistance. People were concerned, boy, if I got vaccinated, would I get polio? And so Elvis Presley, backstage at the Ed Sullivan Show, Elvis got vaccinated. One person. Within 6 months, 80% of all teenagers in America were vaccinated.
I just got chills. So from under 1% to 80%
In less than a year.
in less than a year.
So we worked, as you know, at Faster Cures and in trying to move the vaccines along and the technology that was available, this RNA for 10 years, but an unbelievably short period of time. It was just a matter of weeks, less than 9 weeks, when the DNA of the virus was released to when Moderna actually put it in a human being, the first human beings.
It's insane.
And within a year, they were approved. And so we had this model then, and we have it today at Faster Cures, that science is like a train. It can go 200 to 300 miles an hour, but the average train in the United States travels at 55 miles an hour, the same as it did 100 years ago. And what's the problem? The tracks. The approvals, the distribution, everything else that exists. You cannot run a train going 200 miles an hour on tracks that can't take more than 60 or 70. And so what broke down was we couldn't convince, and because of the Elvis story, we wondered, where is Elvis Presley today? Whether the President of the United States, whether Tony Fauci, a doctor or scientist, whether the CEO, whether a professional athlete said something today, it wasn't going to have that same effect. And people were skeptical of science, and social media allowed anyone with any theory to go out. And I think this is a lesson, not just for vaccination and medical science, but if you have a new product and a new idea you want to introduce, you need to make sure that people are willing to accept it from that, accept the use of that.
Let's pivot a little bit here. When I look out at the private equity landscape, there are two things that are sort of very evident to me. One, you're talking about amongst the largest pools of capital in the world, right? And two, is there a major private equity firm in this country that somebody who worked for you at some point doesn't run?
Yes, there are many of them, but
how has private equity changed the way companies build and develop and retain their management teams?
I'd say the first strategy was, can you link ownership and management? Do they have the same utility curve? Are they rowing in the same direction, if we want to use that term again? And what I saw in the 1960s, particularly early 70s, is the objectives of management didn't necessarily align with the owners at all time. In many cases, how much you could get paid or compensated or a role was a function of how big you were, not how profitable you were. So the growth of private equity dramatically changed the relationship between owners and people running businesses, and created thousands and thousands of opportunities for great entrepreneurs, of course, great chief marketing officers,
Yes.
where you could get paid substantially different than you would in a normal public company, where the owner recognized the importance of marketing, recognized the importance of finance, and the CEO. And in many ways changed the world, since you had the profitability of the company align with the value of the owner, but also align with the manager, who in many cases was now given significant equity in the company. And that grew, and today there are far more companies controlled by private equity than are public in the United States.
Yep.
And 5 of your 10 largest employers are private equity firms. But they grew, going back to the economy, David, on really 3 things. One, extremely low interest rates, which allowed you to leverage at low cost. 2, increased leverage levels so that you could double the amount of debt you had. And 3, no covenants, giving you flexibility. Those 3 things are gone.
They're changing.
And who does the best job in managing the company? And you could see that in many ways, even on public companies. So if I took Kraft and Nestle, for example, Nestle was the largest packaged food company or food company in the world, or consumer products. Kraft was a merger of Heinz and Kraft and General Foods and others, and one of the largest, or the largest in the United States. And there was a dramatic thing that occurred at Nestle. They picked a former employee chairman of Fresenius, a healthcare company, to be the head of Nestle.
So a chocolate company brought in a bioscience guy to run it.
And what did he announce? He announced, we're going to be a healthcare company. Now, that caused problems for the marketing department
I'm sure.
and on social media. And the first reaction was, first they give you diabetes, and now they're going to try to deal with your diabetes. There are 360. But over the last few years, you've seen here that he's dramatically changed the company. He did sell the chocolate business in the United States, but he bought vitamin companies, natural food companies, etc., to change the mixture so that he could say our product line reflects the fact that we think we're a health company in the 21st century. And the stock market responded, and Kraft Heinz, with 2 of the most prestigious investors in the world, Warren Buffett and 3G out of Brazil, owning half the company, the stock today sells for, say, 40% of what it sold for. And Nestle sells for a multiple of what it sold for. But you can't deny ultimate science. And if it wasn't for technology and science, we wouldn't be able to sequence your microbiome. We wouldn't know what happens when you put things in your body, etc.
So let's jump into that, right? So first of all, it's always fascinating to me to look at how management drives inside a company in different directions, and companies can go in different directions, even ones that are of equal value or equal scale. When we think about innovation, which is something that's very near and dear to my heart, I know it's something that you spend a tremendous amount of time on. How do you think innovation is changing the world? And I'm giving you the question in a very open way because I like to hear your answers to very open questions.
Well, I would say first, every industry is subject to disintermediation and disruption, and those companies that think they're not are always at risk. Let's take an industry that's been totally transformed, the media entertainment industry. So when I was growing up and got that little television, there was NBC.
Did they have TV when you grew
Yes,
up?
we had a little wood box when I was growing up. The dinosaurs were still outside. But
The asteroid had it.
we had it. And there were really 6 companies that made content. What people might not recognize is that 5 of those companies were started and formed by an individual that was born within 200 miles of Warsaw. So whether it was Fox, or whether it was Universal, or whether it was MGM, or whether it was Warner, or whether it was Paramount, these outsiders came and they built the companies that are creating the content. Now let's look at it today. Today, the market value of a Fox or the market value of a Paramount is equivalent to probably the intraday variation on the stock in Amazon.
Right.
You know, and during the day, it varies more. And Amazon, 2 billion people, Alphabet, Google, the most visited site in the world, and YouTube, the second most visited site. The world has changed, but it's technology that changed the world. So I was in a meeting in the 1980s with Steve Ross, and they were deciding, should we do DVDs or not? Would anyone watch a DVD? To put a movie on a DVD, it took 2 DVDs, both sides. So I want to watch a movie. I got to put a DVD in. I go and sit down and relax. I got to get up, flip it over, just relax.
I mean, the struggle is real, right? You got to
Get
get
up.
up, you got to walk over.
And take it out twice and
Yep.
flip it. Korea, 5G, downloads a movie in 1 second.
I know, it's crazy.
Okay, so technology has changed the world. The growth of Netflix was based really on 3 things. One, moving from first a DVD that they mailed to you, then being able to stream. Therefore, they could be anywhere in the world and stream it to you.
Yep.
They just needed to create content. Had the other studios fully understood what the future was, when you think of what occurred, so many times in history, it is not the leaders that's had the vision to convert to where the future was going. And anyone that had bet on storage costs going to zero, they're 1/1000th today, speeds becoming infinite, access to 9 billion digital devices on the planet, and costs dropping, has been a winner if they focused on that. And so it was technology that allowed the disintermediation of these businesses. And still today, the ability to introduce new products to people, disintermediated products that have been around 30 or 40 or 50 years, a great CMO, there's no telling what they can do today.
Exactly. Let's talk a little bit about Tesla, right? So obviously Elon's done an incredible job building this company. It's worth, you told me the other day,
$900 billion.
$900 billion. But when you think about that, that's more than every automotive company on the planet combined. We had dinner a few months ago, a dinner you had arranged, and the CEO of General Motors was there, and she was talking about their electric business and how that is. How do you think that plays out?
We have 2 factors here. One, the market believes in the founder of that company and his ingenuity, creativity, and has awarded him enormous values. And is it a battery company? Is it a technology company, etc.? But he's had the wind to his back in that the world wanted to move away from carbon-based energy, at least at a car. And so he took the leadership. And there's a lot of fantastic companies. The most valuable companies in the world, Microsoft, Google, today Amazon, Tesla, Apple, the most valuable.
Yep.
Most of them are digital.
Yep.
He actually had to make an automobile, put the pieces
Yeah,
together,
it's crazy.
make it work, deal with safety.
Well, he didn't just make it work. It's like one of the best operating cars on the planet, right?
Yes.
It's a great car.
Yes, we have one, and our kids. But my point is, he was a pioneer in that area. He's been a pioneer in SpaceX and what he's done. He was a pioneer in PayPal. So you have market acceptance of a leadership. And I think this is one of the things that underlines what is the most valuable asset in the world. It's the productivity of individuals and ability. So you've had books written, great company. It was great because of the people that work for the company.
Human capital, right?
It might not be great today because they no longer, that has a different team working for them. And so they get enormous value. And the sheer fact today with manufacturing, 1% to 2% of all the cars in the world, that you have more than 50% of the value of all the car companies, is telling us there's enormous faith in the technology, what they're going to do, etc. So you're backing an individual. And what you're seeing in the marketplace today is that people with enormous ability come together, build an organization, build something. And it isn't just business. We could say it's government leadership too. You took Singapore from nothing to one of the great countries in the world with the leadership and the insight of Lee Kuan Yew, that he built his country on the ability of people and educating people from that standpoint. And so when I think about businesses, I often think about who's leading that business. Do they have the insight? Are they going to establish a team? And a little company that I had financed in the early 80s, mid 80s, called Danaher, was worth just a few $100 million at the time. And it was headed by Mitch and Stephen Rails. And they hired great managers and had great discipline. And at the time, by the late 80s, in 89 at one time, GE was the most valuable company in the world.
How did private equity affect that? So you got Danaher on one side, privately controlled company. You've got
Public.
now, yeah,
Both public, but controlled by a family.
Sorry, controlled by the Rails brothers. Then you had, of course, GE, which was sort of like the Hunger Games of management, right?
If you wanted to be a manager, you wanted to get in the GE management program. How did private equity change that?
Yeah.
Okay, so 1970s private equity really gets born. 80s it flourishes, it continues to expand. And now private equity, what are they looking for? They're looking for managers. Anyone who's an owner knows that the team makes a difference.
Of course.
Okay, in certain decades, it's the financial leadership. In other decades, it might be the human resources. In other decades, it might be marketing and product development. So what happened to GE? When you went to GE, they identified, say, the 32 most promising people. They followed them, they moved them, and then they brought it down to 16, and then they brought it down to 5, and then they picked one, and then the 4 left and ran other businesses. Well, what private equity realized is we can go find people that have a PhD in management and leadership. They're working for GE.
Right.
And if they're one of the 32 or one of the 16, they're going to offer them a percentage of the company, more pay than GE can pay them, more ownership than they can pay them, and they can be the CEO today.
So instead of being one of 32, you can be one of one.
And by the time GE picks the 5, who they would have picked, none of them are working for GE. So you're now left to pick those that weren't picked.
Were there times when you didn't even get to 5? That many left?
No, you can get them. That wasn't the point. The point was that
No, I'm saying
I don't think you could get to 16. My guess is most of the ones that would have been in the 16 were chosen. And GE promoted from within. Well, today, Danaher's worth almost 3 times what GE is worth in equity.
And you would have never thought that.
And the CEO of GE is the former CEO of Danaher.
Shocking.
Okay, so they went out and looked for the best talent they could find. And I think people don't fully realize that just one person can make a difference. You have to focus on this issue of disintermediation that's going to occur and disruption by new technologies. And they allow you today online. I can introduce my product to 9 billion people, or if China doesn't let it go, and 7 billion people. I could never reach that group before. How do I reach them? How do I be creative? And what are their needs of that population? And so, to me, it's created greater risk. And the key is, can you disintermediate yourself?
So in the last few minutes we have, Mike, what should a marketer be thinking about today as they think about innovation, technology? Where do you think the puck is going on that, so to speak?
Tell you the truth, I don't think the puck has moved when we talk about it at that level.
Interesting.
Why is Shakespeare popular 400 to 500 years later? because he wrote about human emotions, jealousy, love,
Passion.
indecision. These emotions, what are people interested in? They want good health for them and their kids. They want a good job. They want a healthy life. They want something that makes them laugh, etc. They want to simplify their life. They want to know if they push a button, it works. They want to know if you're giving them something to eat, it tastes good, they enjoy it, but also it might be good for them. And so I don't think the basic human emotions have changed. And so what we're seeing in parts of the developed world is that you had this enormous dramatic change, I would say, in rich and poor. And so if we took the United States, you have the highest percentage of people in the world that are millionaires in the United States. A big country, 8 or 9% of the people are millionaires. It's due to a number of factors: invest in technology, invest in biotech, owned a home, whatever it might be. But the U.S. also, of all developed countries, has the highest percentage of its population that has a net worth under 10,000. And you see all these stories that 40% of the population could not deal with a medical emergency of $400. So
Miss a paycheck.
how are you going to meet your needs? Political leaders are constantly trying to figure out, how can we meet the needs of the majority of the population? And part of it is you're blaming it on the wealthy, but the real key is, can you lift them up? Can you make them proud? Can you make them feel good about themselves and their life? Do they feel like they're experiencing a meaningful life? And when you talk about marketing, we see often that if I had a product and I told you, if you bought a pair of shoes, we're going to give a pair of shoes to someone that doesn't have shoes,
Yep.
they will sell better. If I have a product and for this period of time, a percentage of the sales are going to go for breast cancer research or something, it does better.
Mike, obviously we could sit here all day. This has been amazing. To summate, you think everybody should just move to digital. I get that. No, I'm teasing. So no, that was it. You're
The world has given you, to summarize, David, I learned to play bridge at a young age. What was the bridge about? It was about trying to understand what was in the other people's hands by their bidding and how they played the game so you could best maximize your hand. Today, you at Zeta and others have the ability to maximize what I want to accomplish by analyzing all the data. What are the important issues to an individual, so I'm not viewing them as a stranger? What is important to them? What do they care about? So I can communicate. I think one of our secrets in finance was not going to 1,000 people to try to find 20 that wanted to buy, but going to 40 people.
right. The right
So-
40 people.
And so that was maybe our differential, understanding what was important to that customer. You today have the luxury of data to allow you to have that knowledge. We did not have data available. We only had our data banks and our interaction at
Well,
that
you're
time.
to jump ahead because we are out of time. I have never met a human who had a database in their head like you. So it's been an absolute honor to get you to come here today, to spend time together. I really appreciate you as a friend, a mentor, and somebody who I really, really love.
Likewise, David. And I couldn't be more I was disintermediated by the IBM 370, and now I'm happy just to use data and Zeta.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.